So we're doing free self-defense class in blocks of 30, 15 women each.
Wow.
And we sold out the first 3 hours pre 12 o'clock.
Incredible.
It's
incredible.
Really
but it goes to show you how relevant it is at the moment, you know.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, it's a big subject. It's a hot topic. It's sad, but it's a hot topic.
I think you've summed up everything I've said in the last 7 days, basically. Hi, John. How's things? You all right?
I'm good, Kevin. I'm good. Keeping busy, keeping the head down.
Good.
How are things with you?
Yeah, good. Doing the complete opposite as usual. So
yeah. I see that. During a time when the entire planet Earth is taking it handy, you're actually getting busier by the look of things. So
yeah, we've got a few projects on the go. But this one's more of a labor of love for me. It gives me a great chance to catch up with people.
Yeah.
Me and you have spoke so much over the last few years about topics.
Yeah.
It's always ended up being one or two liners because we all know that at tournaments you just don't get that chance to speak.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
I guess the first thing for everybody else, this is going to be a really interesting one for me because I know a lot about you, but I also know nothing about you and a full background. So I know I can make the assumption. So I'm going to be starting properly this time. So let's talk martial arts history background first.
Sure, no problem at all, Kevin. First of all, thanks for having me on today. It's great to be here. It's great to be chatting with you again. I started in Kempo Karate in 1986 here in Dublin.
The year I was born, it was a good year.
That's a common theme now to all of these interviews. You know, that was before I was born. Yeah, I know. 1986. I was, now to put it into context and to give me a little bit of a reprieve, I was 7 years of age. So I didn't spend too long in Kempo. Kev, I did a summer. I got the yellow belt, and then I didn't go back the following year. But I still had a big interest in martial arts. Bruce Lee was everywhere at the time.
Yeah.
And the big people over watching his videos and trying to emulate what he did in those videos and that. So in 1987, a Taekwondo club moved in called the Irish School of Taekwondo, moved into a sports hall not far from where I was living. And myself and two friends said we'd go up and watch and see what it was all about. So we went in and we were just blown away by what was going on in the class. You know, the instructor was a stocky man. He was a small, stocky guy with a booming voice, you know, and all the commands were in Korean. And just like the military, all the students were lined up in white dobaks and they were just flashing out these kicks that we generally didn't see in Kempo. The Kempo was great, don't get me wrong, but just Taekwondo had that little bit more for us as young lads anyway. And we joined. The instructor came down and his name is Tom Carty, man who had a very big impact on me as a young man growing up in Dublin's inner city. It kind of shaped who I am today in terms of me as an instructor and as a coach. And I'll be forever grateful for his input. He came down and spoke to us, and we joined the following week, and I've been involved ever since. So that was 1987. I opened up my own club then in 2004 with a pal of mine who came through the same club. Joined ACOI as it was back then, so the association, All-Style Kickboxing Association of Ireland, which is now Kickboxing Ireland. Joined that in 2005 with my club. So as kids growing up, we would have competed in all the Taekwondo tournaments plus the kickboxing tournaments. So we were kind of an open club. We weren't affiliated with the ITF, so we didn't have to stay within that system. We could go and compete anywhere at all. So I kind of brought that philosophy with me into my own club in 2004. Joined ACOI as it was back then in 2005. Started to train young guys and young girls, and eventually we made some impacts into the national team for Kickboxing Ireland, and then went on to win a couple of major titles. Firstly, the Junior European title with Lauren back in 2012 or 13, and then just built on it from there. And now a handful of European and world titles, SWACO world titles in the bag, and here we are now. So that's my martial art background, Kev. So I've been coaching for nearly 20 years now, and about 10 of those years has been at international level. So I went on to be national coach for Kickboxing Ireland in light contact. Did that for 5 years, and now currently sit in the position of director of coaching, which is predominantly around kind of coach education within Kickboxing Ireland.
While we're talking about education, can you give us a little bit of an insight there? Because for me, this is one of the biggest shifts from the outside. I'm not saying this has never been a focus, but from the outside looking in, there's been a major shift from your social media or from the perception of others, including myself, that education is now obviously playing a major part in how you attack things.
Yeah.
What's your background in regards to this?
Yeah, it's a great point, Kev. I was always a coach that was always looking and willing to upskill myself and to learn as much as I could. And I had a really good kind of textbook understanding of coaching and developing, physically and mentally the athlete. I got an opportunity to go back to college in 2018. Kev, I got a text from a friend of mine who was a lecturer in Tralee IT, which is in County Kerry here in Ireland, to say that a master's degree course in coaching and performance science was now being promoted at University College Dublin. And he suggested I should look into it. And I did. I got accepted onto the course. I did a 2-year master's degree, part-time in coaching and performance science. And I suppose it was a great course. It was a bit of a life-changing course, to be honest with you. It brought everything that I knew in terms of my textbook understanding of things, validated a lot of stuff, but it taught me how to critically engage with and analyze the information that's out there around physical development, physiological development of athletes, strength and conditioning, sports psychology, nutrition, and all those lovely topics that cover coaching the athlete. I've learned a lot, and I've continued to study and I've continued to research. I qualified with a first class honours in that degree last year.
Congratulations.
Which was nice, yeah. Which was nice to get. It was tough. I won't lie to you, Kev. It was a tough course. It nearly broke me at times, but I stuck the pace, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone in Ireland who was looking at that particular course from a coaching perspective. And I've just stayed the course, Kev. I've got really interested in the exercise physiology, sports science, performance science, and coaching, and I've just kept with the research. I've kept with the reading. I've brought what I've learned from my dissertation topic, which was around cycling, functional threshold power and cycling, which was really an investigation into energy systems and power production within cycling. And I've kind of tried to extrapolate a lot of that information into what's available for combat sport athletes. So
right, so that's
my goal at the moment, Kevin, without patronising anybody out there, there's a lot of great coaches with a lot of great information, is to try, but there's still a huge gap. There's still a huge gap between what the sports science is saying and what's happening from a traditional perspective within coaching and martial arts in particular. I'm just trying to bridge that gap. I'm just trying to put information out there. People can interact with it if they want. I'm not particularly pushed by it if they do or if they don't. But the information is there, and I'd like to think people will engage with it and learn from it. So that's kind of my driver at the moment. And it's pretty much since we've been locked down here that I've been putting a little bit more effort into social media and Instagram in particular. So, yeah, that's where that's come from, Kev.
I think it's so everything you've highlighted there, for me as a coach, I pride myself on, I talk about it a lot, on being a good coach, right? That's my driving force. But I appreciate in my own knowledge set there's gaps, right? I think what makes combat sport very interesting, in my opinion, is there's so many facets of being a great coach that it never feels, or at least from my perspective, it never feels like you're gonna, Trivial Pursuit with and you're putting the little pies in, the wedges. I'm always missing a couple of wedges, right? And that's what it feels like.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, and for me, I think I cover certain bases of pies that people won't ever get in their career.
Yeah.
But then I look at this stuff and it feels so unobtainable, because it feels, well, especially for my life more now than ever, as you highlighted, is spinning plates, and I'm 5 seconds away from any one given plate crashing. That's how I feel right now.
For sure.
So for the balance I think you're creating, and I do feel like your social media and the format of your social media allows people to have the opportunity to engage with you. It never feels condescending. It never feels like I know something you don't. No.
Good.
It does always feel like, well, how many times have I one-lined you saying, John, talk to me about that. What's that about? Like, and I'd like to think that there's enough humble coaches out there that are probably behaving in the same manner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I get messages from people from all across the world. I was talking to a combat coach from Canada last week. I was talking to a nutritionist from Latvia this morning. It's and a performance analyst from the Netherlands who used to fight with the Waco team there a couple of weeks back, or a couple of years back. Yeah, so it's been great in terms of engagement with people, and sometimes I'm deliberately provocative just to see what comes
Have
back.
noticed, yeah,
Yeah, and I'm just dropping stuff out there to see what kind of traction it gets, and
yeah,
but my goal is to kind of, again, without being patronising or condescending in any way to athletes and coaches, is to just try and get people to kind of take stock of what they're doing in their training, because
yeah.
there's so much stuff that athletes are doing, and they're training their backsides off, but they're training in the wrong direction on many occasions, many
We're
cases.
going to touch on a lot of that because I've
Yeah,
thrown, obviously, Natasha being my wife and my team being quite proactive from a competitive point of view.
sure.
We have numerous group chats, and I brought this up, and there was a lot of questions of people who do follow you that I'm going to kind of just throw at you a little bit today.
Okay, yeah, cool. Sounds good.
And
I
it
hope I
was,
can answer them now.
yeah, so do I.
Where's
Jesus.
where's my book?
Where's that book gone?
Where's that book?
There's some.
That's cool.
Let's just get into it. Like the first one, which always makes me laugh because I've seen it a few times.
Yeah.
In fact, before we get to that, do you think you would have gone to the detail you've gone without the lockdown that we've had?
That's a good question.
Because this has given us a lot of opportunities. Even for me personally, there's certain things now that I would not have done if this didn't happen. I wouldn't have had the time to even consider it. I'm just curious, for someone who's obviously has such passion in it, started re-education pre-lockdown and has now gone into this what feels fully fledged. Do you feel like you'd be able to commit to it as much as you've done without the pandemic?
I'd like to think so. Kev. So I've got a little routine going, but I try and we've got two young kids here, and we try and balance that. It's like try and balance parenting and bedtime and dinner time and nappy changes. And I try and my wife Nadine is great. She's fantastic. She's a wonderful support to me. I try to get an hour or two where I can just read and research. And what helps me a lot, Kev, in my own learning is not just reading something and trying to absorb it, but reading it and then writing it down again. And that's what I do with the social media. I write it down again, and then I hope to get interaction from people who will question it, challenge it, and might even push me to go and look at what I've written, and then maybe look a little bit more into what that means. So for me, it's very much part of the learning process. And I'd like to think I would. And I have plans in the future for bringing all of that science in terms of what's written down into a more practical environment within a sports performance gym focused on combat sports. So that's the long-term plan.
We'll definitely get you over. Like, obviously, we've had this new CrossFit gym that we've spent a lot of time on, and
looks great.
You've got a tunnel from your martial arts matted area to what is probably a great, literally one building. It looks like the letter H, capital. Excellent. So martial arts school. There's your combining tunnel, and then you're straight into the CrossFit gym.
Excellent. So they're actually adjoined, are they?
Yeah.
That's super.
So for our guys at squad training, when we get back to it, the adults will start, and this is, I'm going to pose the first question to you now. They'll start in either one of the halls. Yeah. So the first question: are we working out or are we sparring first?
Oh, I think are they novice? Are they novice athletes that you're dealing with? Are they people coming to the sport for the first time?
No, absolutely not. So it's this age-old question, and I've done both teaching seminars myself. Like, people come into seminars and I'll teach them. I'll do no sparring at all, because ultimately it's the finished product. I don't need to see you spar. I'm not really that interested. I'm more interested in teaching you something. Or I'll get them to spar straight away, so I gauge people at their best while they're fresh.
That makes sense.
Or the age-old one. The not so much me, but the instructor in the past who smashes them for 50 minutes and then show me 10 minutes of performance sparring, which looks terrible. Back to the original question: are they going to go through like a workout, which does include a barbell, by the way, or are they going to show me the finished product sparring? If you had it your way, is there a routine you'd stick to, or is there a rule of thumb that might help people?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you'd even split them on separate days, Kev, if you could, depending on the load. But I mean, in theory, the learning should be done first, right? While they're cognitively fresh, they're able to process information, take in information, and apply that information within their sport-specific training. If you were to reverse that and you were to get them to do, a hell of a workout first, well, then you're not getting them in their best shape for learning, right? They're going to be cognitively stressed. They're going to be physically and physiologically stressed. And you've only got people for a small window of time before
Yeah.
fatigue kicks in and they switch off, and before you know it, the whole thing becomes a little bit of a chore. And then if you've got fatigue athletes trying to work on sport specific tactics or strategy, and because they're tired or overwhelmed and it's not going right, well, then you've got pissed off athletes. So it's a fine balance, Kev, for sure. Yeah, I think from my perspective, you're always best getting the learning done first, building your conditioning on that. And as well as that, there's an element of conditioning within our sport-specific training as well.
Massively.
Yeah, huge. I mean, while we're moving around, sparring is conditioning. It doesn't get any more specific.
I've seen you answer that.
Yeah.
Sport-specific conditioning for kickboxing, sparring, and you put sparring.
100%. Yeah, it doesn't get any more specific, and sometimes we get a little bit distracted by all of these other modalities, these other shiny objects that we use for conditioning, when you can't get any more specific for your sport than doing your sport. You can do all the other supplementary stuff to kind of aid that and to target certain physiological parameters and stuff. But for us, sparring is our sport, and we gain a lot of conditioning both physically and cognitively and mentally from actually just engaging in sparring.
Throwing the devil's advocate in there.
Go for it. Yeah.
Footballers.
Yeah.
Play football.
Yeah.
For 90 minutes.
They do.
On game day.
Crazy.
But beyond that, they're not really playing a full match, right?
Yeah, generally they'll use different. Yeah, the coaches will use different formats for their training. Small-sided games. The S&C coaches within soccer, especially from a professional point of view, have a huge hand in preparing those soccer athletes for the big event. But they're always skill developing, and depending on the coach's philosophy, they're always working with it. In small-sided games is the concept of making the pitch smaller, removing the amount of people. So you might have a 3v2 or a 6v1 even, and you're developing. It's a constraints-led approach within that coaching environment.
I think that's what makes our sport quite interesting, because our skill set does almost instantly translate to our finished product.
Totally.
Whereas your footballs and like a rugby player couldn't go through a full round of it, but we're quite happy to go for a full round of kickboxing, right?
Yeah,
because it seems to be I don't know what the translation is, but it does seem to translate better. I've got a friend of ours in Scotland, a guy called Colin Ritchie. He's like a sports scientist, very similar to yourself actually, and he works with Livingston Football Club. And one of the things I always liked about talking to him more recently when he's in that position was the importance of everything else beyond skill training in the gym, explosive compound work. And Colin talked about this, no joke, when I first moved up here over 10 years ago and trying to apply it to kickboxing. I think even then it was so far in advanced, people it went straight over their heads. And there's a proportion now that still probably, like, listening to yourself and people like Colin, for me, it's just like I'm super open-eyed and bright, ears are ready to take it all in, because if you don't listen, you're going to struggle to comprehend the detail that is brought to the forefront.
Exactly. And understanding that, sometimes you don't, as a coach, you don't have to get the finer detail of what a scientific journal says, but it's great if it's interpreted. It can be interpreted from a practical point of view. So ask the question, what does that mean from a practical point of view? So this morning I put up a very detailed post about the difference between what a VO2 max is and VO2 peak. And you could read that and say, that means nothing to me. And I'm sure a lot of people will read and say, that means nothing to me. But it actually does. But the question has to be asked, what does it mean for me from a practical point of view? Coaches need to ask that question. And that's why, Kev, from an elite perspective and from high performance sport, coaches kind of command the program, but they've got sports scientists in the camp. They've got their performance analysts, they've got their nutritionists, their SEC, and the coach meets with them and says, right, what's happening with Kev's hamstrings today? Are they stronger, or are they going to pop?
Yeah, I like that unity within a team. Like, again, referring it back to Colin, Livingston Football Club isn't a massive team, but they're a small knit coaching staff. And it certainly feels like the manager is very much like, in charge of the orchestra. And then he's got these little specialists coming in, just making the changes. He doesn't have to fully understand it.
No.
But what he does have in people like Colin and people like yourself is trust.
Yes, 100%.
Trust that you understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's one of the biggest
100%.
things I've taken away from a lot of your posts is you seem to have a really good understanding of taking base level information and research and applying it to combat sport.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's been missing recently. I've spoken to a few people in the past. There's been some research done by specifically Wacko Turkey at the time.
That's right, yeah.
Scientists that have kind of looked at our sport.
Yeah.
There's a few guys in Greece that I know are super knowledgeable in regards to S&C stuff for specific sports, kickboxing, like basketball as well. I was chatting to one guy about, and how are you translating that foundation research into our sport with such confidence that you're publishing it? Because if you didn't believe it, you wouldn't say it. I know that's not the type of person you are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think I've come at this position nearly from what's the word, from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. So a lot of S&C exercise science people will go into that field first. So they'll come through college and they'll learn about exercise science and physiology, S&C, and then they'll go work with a coach. They need to learn about the sport.
Yeah,
I'm the coach. I've done 20 years of that stuff, and I've gone back. So I've gone back nearly in a reverse method, and I've gone through that system along with other S&C coaches and exercise science and stuff like that. What I do have is a unique understanding of my own perspective of what the sport is and what it means. And what I do know is what those physiological and physical demands of the sport are. So once you understand what makes the elite kickboxer work, from a point fighting perspective, from a light contact kick light perspective, from a ring sport perspective, what are the elite guys? If you were to take them in, lift the bonnet up on them and look into the engine, what are we looking at? What makes them tick at such a high level? And as a coach, you get to understand what actually does make them tick. So I get the physiological and physical demands of the sport. And all of that's done in terms of research, Kev. You can go into any of the sports science databases and you can look at the research that's been done. You know, from a physiological and physical standpoint, we need a certain amount of anaerobic capacity. We need a certain amount of aerobic capacity. We need explosive power. We need muscular endurance. We need relatively high VO2 max, all that stuff. So that's your measure.
Yeah.
Now, once you understand where you need to go in terms of achieving that, you start to build the foundations in terms of your training program. So what do I need to do to get that anaerobic capacity tweaked so I can be explosive? What do I need to do to get that aerobic capacity tweaked so I can recover in between rounds or even during the round so I can keep going? So I'm not burnt out by the time I get to the end of the second round of the championships, for example. I'm struggling to get through the last round. What do I need to develop strength and power? You know, all of those attributes that the elite fighters have. How do I get my guys to do that? So I start to put in those scaffolds, a piece of the scaffold, a piece of the puzzle in order to get them training in a similar way. That means I have to go back to the research and I have to, unfortunately, there's not a whole pile in terms of just specific combat sport, exercise science and physiology. There's a little bit, there's not much. But there's a massive amount in endurance sport, Kev. Massive amount in endurance from marathon running, cycling. Now, they're totally different sports, but because they've got so in-depth research, you can look in and extrapolate from that and take pieces out. And, you know, like the old Bruce Lee concept, right? Take what's useful and discard what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, from a cycling perspective, those guys, especially the sprinters, need a really high anaerobic capacity. They call it a VLA max, you know, the maximum volume of lactate production. And that equates to power output or energy production within those anaerobic pathways. We need that too as combat sport athletes, but in a different perspective. So we take what we know from other sports and we try and extrapolate it and use it within our own sport. And so far, it's been pretty successful. And you can kind of then measure that against the work, the investigations within combat sport itself of what's already been done. And you can just make relatively strong assumptions. Now, the caveat within all of that, Kev, is that there's no one size fits all for an athlete. And that's one of the biggest mistakes we make as coaches. You know, we put everyone through the same program, we train them the same way, even for the conditioning. We don't fully understand whether fighter A needs, has a different physiological or physical need than fighter B, but yet we're giving them the same program. So the real magic within S&C and kind of conditioning and combat sports is it's unique. It needs to be specific to the
individual management.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
I think that's I like that. I think so. Let's talk about some anomalies. I can't even say the word.
Anomalies. Yeah.
The fighters on the circuit that have little to no conditioning, but churn out results, and you'd still never bet against. This is the other side of the coin I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, the outliers.
This is the side of the coin there. Science has no place. Well, maybe it does. You can explain it, but muscle memory alone maybe is the argument. But
possibly
that have been there for so long, and they have that habit of winning. And I'm not going to name names because I'll get shot. But there's certain fighters there that I've met who are 74 kilos, who are now 94 kilos, fight very differently. Their common denominator is victory.
100%. And you know, that's the great thing about combat sport, Kev.
There's so many variables to combat sport. Exactly.
There's so many variables. You know, it's not always the best conditioned athlete that wins.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not always the person that can bench 120 kilos or squat 200 kilos that wins, or have an anaerobic capacity.
You think that's what makes us unique as a sport?
I think so. I mean, I don't think we're on our own. There are other sports that have similar mountain biking is one, right?
Really?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, part of my research when I was in college was on cycling, and there was a number of papers on mountain biking. And some of these lads were not fit, Kevin, but they were pulling in great performance times, because a lot of it's downhill, right? So there's not a whole lot of exertion needed, but you need to have a very clued in eye for, you know, when to make the turn, when to make the jump.
Yeah.
And the same, I work in canoe sport here, Kev, and canoe slalom is similar. Obviously, there's an amount of conditioning needed for it.
Yeah.
There's so many variables because the environment is so.
Some of the styles of that.
Yeah.
The canoeing in general, like from the Olympics we watch.
Yeah.
Some of it is brutal. Like.
Yeah.
The lactate that some of those guys must go through at points within those tournaments. I
for sure.
Think about measuring that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, some of them are absolute beasts. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point is, within slalom, it's similar to us. There's just so many variables that a person can win. You know, it's like not always the tallest fighter wins, even though they've got that advantage of reach. And I've got a girl. She got silver at the juniors there, 2019 at the European Championships. And she got faced against, I think she was a Turkish girl. She was in the 55 kilo division, Kevin. She was about 6'2". My girl's maybe, I don't know, 5'6" maybe.
So normal.
Yeah. There was a clear advantage for the Turkish girl. But she didn't know how to use the reach. My girl, because she was used to fighting taller opponents, knows how to come in under the guard.
Again,
work the body.
Combat sports and throws in the joker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know,
you get the guys right in the sport who I truly feel their success has come from great foundation.
Yeah.
From your side, let's call it your side of the coin for want of a better argument. Yeah. They've done the work. They've kind of researched it. People who stand out to me straight away, you got like Jon Mackey, who's obviously a very fit young lad.
Yeah.
Technically perfectly capable, but Zolt always looked fit when he fought, and he had one of the most high expenditure energy wise his style of kicking, but he obviously had fitness foundation there as an individual.
Of course.
And then you've got Robbie McManamy from Ireland. Now Robbie's a funny one because I know Robbie's got a great level of fitness. He loves training, obsessed with sparring, so his conditioning side of it was always solved, because trying to get Robbie to do a drill when he wasn't teaching a seminar was like pulling teeth. He'd rather put a head guard on and spar with you. But again, I truly believe that his discipline and foundation through fitness training put him to where he is. And then the closest one to home is Natasha for me.
Yeah,
I never ever doubt Natasha's engine, and as a coach, that's lovely to feel.
Yeah,
because I said, I'm there when she gets up first thing in the morning and does her thing. I know her schedule better than anybody.
Yeah.
And then you got the martial arts on top of it. But I know that when it gets to that moment, that foundation's going to see her through.
Absolutely.
So they're the guys for me that have probably accidentally done something right, i.e. what you're talking about, but they maybe didn't know what they were completely doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you've named a couple of people there that are they are anomalies in themselves, right? They're outliers. They're exceptional athletes.
I thought I would highlight them ones rather than the ones that do no training and still win.
Yeah, no,
you can't name them.
You're 100%. You're 100%. And I think because of the skill level and experience that they bring, they've always got that edge.
Mm-hmm.
But where conditioning comes into it, Kev, is when all variables are equal.
Interesting.
So the skill and experience are the same. The skill and experience are the same. And I think what we'll find when we get into the Olympic Games and the national governing bodies and the National Olympic Committees and the statutory sport bodies within each country start to bring kickboxing into their sports science institutes. So now all of our athletes will be coming through institutes where there are experts within sports science, tweaking everything we do, because we're going to be up against the Greeks, the British, I'm talking from an Irish perspective, the Germans, the Slovenians, who are all going through that institute, that sports science process in order to make us that 1% better. When everybody's doing that, well, then the margins are tiny. And that's why, for example, in relation to Olympic Taekwondo, a couple of years back, there was so much at stake that there was very little happening within the rounds, right? Because the margins were so tight. So now we're removing, for the want of a better word, we're removing that disparity in experience and skill level. And you've got all of these scientists now looking at our athletes with magnifying glasses, saying, how can we make this person better? Because the Spanish are doing it.
It's also a massive change in the style, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So like the scoring system, the sensor systems were adapted and changed. Yeah. And I think if you looked at, like you said, the Olympic WTF style from now until maybe 25 years ago, you would actually be, under no problems of actually recategorizing it as a different martial art.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
It went from an electric. I'm not here to argue what's good or bad. I know what I personally prefer.
Yeah.
But you went from this electric, spinny, wheelie type
black leg power shots,
to what's now become a super tactical chess game that maybe doesn't have the same highlights, doesn't mean it's any easier to win.
Exactly.
And it's that for me, the biggest difference with the WTF side of things was I feel like the more that came into the light of the public, there was more to lose. There's more to lose. There's a natural change, and people started investing in it a lot more. And like you said, the margins became smaller. So you started seeing this shift of entertainment over victory. And that doesn't always equate, right? I know some really super exciting fighters, but they don't always win.
Yeah.
Do I want to watch them fight all the time?
Yeah.
I bet they would prefer winning. But then you look at it and go, well, if you prefer winning, change this. And then you think, well, they haven't. So why haven't they?
Yeah.
Can they not change, or do they just like the way they fight? So
yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an interesting
one. Next controversial one. Running.
Oh,
the important foundation for every combat athlete, apparently.
Well, I've been controversial on this one.
I raised a few eyebrows. This is my favorite one I've watched unfold on social media, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and I'm not. I mean, look, I'm not anti-running at all.
You'd never know.
No, but I do question, because running targets. I just lost my underpants. Here we go. Running targets certain physiological parameters, but you have to run at specific intensities in order to target them. So, one of the overarching principles for training to get better, athletically better, is to stress certain physiological parameters. So one of those well, we can talk about two within the scope of conditioning itself, leaving strength and power development aside. But energy production, for example, for combat sport, we've got two physiological parameters. One is called the lactate turn point number 1, also called the lactate threshold. The second one is lactate turn point number 2, also called the lactate threshold by some. What's happening at lactate turn point 1 and what's happening at lactate 1.2 are two very different physiological phenomena. One is a low intensity parameter, the other is a high intensity parameter. For aerobic base building, you need to be targeting, and the science says this 100%. This is something that we can take from endurance athletes every day. The science says in order to develop your aerobic capacity and your ability to perform aerobically, you must train at a specific threshold. Now, we can demarcate that, or we can identify that by a certain heart rate zone. Yeah. That is a low intensity heart rate zone. If you want to develop your aerobic capacity, you spend a lot of time targeting this particular parameter. That's why running at that particular intensity is useful, because it's something you can do for an hour and a half. You can do it 3 or 4 times a week. It's hard to stress that particular parameter by doing hours and hours of sparring, for example.
The relevance to point fighting, to light contact?
None. Well, to light contact and to kick light, there's a little bit.
Interesting. So you're subcategorizing a major difference at a scientific level between point fighting and light contact.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Let's talk about that in a second. Right?
I kind of agree with that, but continue. Yeah. But
yeah. So when we look at the other threshold up further up the energy production continuum, looks at high intensity or explosive power energy production. Now, when we want to develop what we call anaerobic capacity or anaerobic power, we train at that particular threshold. So that's your high intensity interval training.
Yeah.
Again, usually identified by a heart rate training zone. If you've managed to get yourself tested, you get a printout in your Excel spreadsheet, and it tells you your lactate threshold was at this heart rate. So you've got a zone to focus on. And you spend an amount of time developing your capacities at that level. Now, the magic is getting the balance right, because too much of one suppresses the other.
Right.
This is why in the off season, it's absolutely fine to spend a lot of time developing that aerobic.
Okay, like that. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Now, to go to kind of peel back the layers of your question there, right? The longer the duration of your event, the more aerobic capacity you need. So, for example, if you've got a 5-minute Wacko Pro title fight, 5 rounds, you're going to need a little bit more aerobic capacity, because your aerobic capacity is the kingpin for recovery while you're fighting and in between rounds. So what the aerobic capacity does is, the aerobic system does, we've all heard about lactate and how lactate accumulates in the body, and at a certain point it's associated with, although not responsible for, fatigue and burning of the muscles and things starting to shut down. The aerobic system, a strong aerobic system, comes in like a hoovers up lactate and puts it back into work and makes lactate.
Now you're talking.
Turn back into.
I'm understanding now. You're using analogies that are right up my street.
So it suppresses lactate production. That's where the aerobic capacity for combat sport is really, really useful. From a point fighting perspective, there's a different energy system at play here. So it's the alactic, the phosphocreatine energy production system. It's the same energy system that Usain Bolt relies on to get from A to B as fast as he can in under 10 seconds. So when I stand up here, Kevin, if I was to stand from my chair, go straight up into the air and sit back down again, what's fueling that is an alactic energy production system. Now, there's a little bit going on in terms of in point fighting. There's a little bit of on the toes, and then boom, right? It's there.
Yeah.
So there's a massive alactic contribution, but there's also a glycolytic contribution. So there's two. Without getting too complicated, there's two anaerobic pathways at play, and very little aerobic capacity is needed. Now, having said that, there's a small bit needed for when you're recovering in between rounds. And this is why.
And that's what makes it interesting, because it's not even that. It's the fact that point fighters at highest level could be fighting for 3 days.
Yes, that's a good point.
So this is where I think it becomes interesting. And looking at a lot of your stuff recently, I understand at base level, and I truly mean at base level, because this stuff fascinates me. My comprehension is of low level, and I'm okay with that.
Don't worry, I'm winging it here.
The thing I find fascinating is we deliver. Let's talk about Usain Bolt. He probably would race 3 times maybe at the Olympics.
Yeah.
The heats.
Yeah.
A point fighter could fight 3 times in one day and fight 3 days at the Irish Open, not including the event, and then doubling up in the light contact event.
Yeah, absolutely. So
So
the great thing about
must be harder, right?
yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about the phosphocreatine system, that a lactic energy production system, is that it replenishes itself within 12 to 15 minutes. So
Okay.
after your fight,
Fast.
oh yeah, absolutely. It replenishes itself pretty quick. It depletes pretty quickly, but it replenishes itself pretty quickly too. It's one of the reasons why it's actually a good idea for point fighters to walk in between rounds, because they're stimulating their aerobic energy production rather than going and sitting down. And that's something that we can extrapolate just from the science of energy production. So a point fighter in between rounds, if they were to move, and I do see a lot of them do it, and I wonder, are they doing that because the aerobic energy system is getting stimulated, because they haven't stopped moving?
I would put a fair whack of money on.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of other things.
Well, keep doing it, guys. Keep doing it, because the science says it's useful. Now, obviously, look, there's a lot of inter-individual variability, and you don't know for sure.
It's this other side that we're not talking about right now that I find makes this conversation really interesting, because for me, my guys will move just like you're discussing between rounds, but I know for them, speaking to them, it's the risk of switch off when sitting down takes the priority. So we're talking about a coaching aspect or a fighting aspect that's not based on science, but based on fighter mentality.
Yeah.
When we talk about running, the old school term of why'd you run? Good discipline.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe. And that's fine, and you can bring that discipline. So, I mean, to go back to the conversation about running, you can take that discipline into running, but run at specific intensities. So what you find a lot of the time is guys just head off. They head off for runs. They're not really focusing on any physiological parameters such as the first lactate threshold for endurance capacity and recovery adaptations and so on. They're just running.
Yeah.
And they're running a distance and they're timing it. I mean, that's great if you're doing a time trial for running. Now, the danger in all of that, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there's a point between lactate threshold 1 and lactate threshold 2 that is defined as no man's land training. Now, from an endurance athlete's point of view, it's not. It's very specific. It's within that range that they find what's called a maximal lactate steady state, which is their race pace. So that's the fastest that they can run consistently over a duration of time without fatiguing, right? And they get to go to the lab and they can identify that, and they know that they can run at certain speeds, marathon speed or whatever, or half marathon speed. We don't have, combat sport athletes don't have a maximal lactate steady state. We are not a steady state sport. We are a combination of explosive combinations, explosive movements, coupled with resting intervals. So we are
how many days at a tournament would then start redefining us as a steady state sport? Because you look at the Wacko Worlds Europeans. We're there for 7 days, John. This is gray areas for me as a coach genuinely kick in.
Absolutely,
my guys are explosive, but I'm conscious they need to be explosive on day 7.
Yeah, absolutely. So to maybe to put the steady state into context, that is just specific to our actual performance.
The event.
So the event, absolutely. So the steady state. This is where I gloss over things sometimes, and I don't explain myself clearly. The steady state is relevant to lactate production within the blood. So when I start to exercise, Kev, the lactate starts to accumulate, and you'll see curves kind of depicting this as it rises in the blood. If I was to go on a run and maintain a low intensity steady state, and my heart rate was kind of 130 consistently, my lactate profile would look like a straight line. It's not accumulating anymore.
Yeah.
Endurance athletes will have that lactate profile where it's at a straight line for a long time. When the referee says fight, our lactate comes out a little bit, and because we're explosive straight away, it does this. And it continues to go up. So the steady state is really within the context of the spar.
I think what we do is quite dicey, though, in the fact that we're expected, or fighters are expected, to perform to such an explosive manner. And then also be able to carry it over for a sustained period of time.
Absolutely.
I think having people like you come into the sport with this knowledge now from a coach who had always been in it, I think this is what makes you very, very unique. You've been me and educated yourself further. And I think that's what makes me so fascinated about the whole thing, because there's certain aspects now that you're going to maybe fill gaps that I've always questioned, but not known
I hope so.
the questions, or even, even the questions that own the answers.
I get you. Yeah, I get you. No, it's nice to know, Kev. I hope it can be of some assistance. And it's interesting, like, when you start at championships, and you could be there for the week, and you could be fighting over 4 days, but I guarantee you by day 4 you are not in the same physical state like you were on day 1.
Absolutely not. Yet the expectation,
your performance, the expectation, well, it's nearly an inverse relationship, isn't it? One goes down as one
goes up. Yeah.
And I think that's the magic of coaching, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Keep that leveled across the
because you're never going to keep that level up, like you said. It's already it's down from the first time the referee says fight, and I think that's where the other aspects of coaching have to kick in.
Absolutely. And you know what? Like this is where other elements of sports science are really useful. Nutrition post-fight.
Psychology.
Yes, absolutely. Nutrition, psychology, post and pre-fight, and making sure the recovery is good. So you're getting to bed. All of our recovery is done while we're fast asleep, Kev. You'll know that. Getting to bed early, making sure that we've got a good night's sleep. So we're reducing the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, which gets activated when we become physically stressed. And the more that's activated over the course of a week, the more we're starting to wind down and grind down on our performance, and our performance output starts to taper off.
That's why I love this thing.
They're a great thing altogether. Yeah.
Like
group band.
Yeah, I don't really buy into much stuff, but to watch my own sleep, or to see the difference of when I take like ZMA and potassium in my recovery, my resting heart rate, my heart rate variability. Like it's a weird one, because we get competitive in my household, yet we're all very, very different. So when someone feels like they're number one in recovery, you take the celebration, but you realize, like, person 2, i.e. Natasha, did 4,000 workouts the day before. Of course, I'm recovering from speaking to Jon via Zoom. To be individually competitive is pointless, but what I do feel is a sense of, not even I must, but I want to. I want to get to bed earlier. I want to see my heart rate down a little bit.
Have you read the science, Kev? Have you read the papers? Have you read any of the research about the Whoop band?
I read that.
It's exactly what you just said. So guys and girls are now starting to pay more attention to getting to bed early, to how they feel in the morning time, to making sure that they're recovered. Where beforehand, they might have not paid much attention to it.
It's like having your mum who can't shout at you. What she's saying is probably right, but ultimately it's your choice if you ignore her.
100%. Your mummy's attached to your wrist there, she's telling you when to get to bed. 100%. It's great, and they're really good for that,
It's also that, but also I don't know how much you've read into them yourself, Jon, but during the beginning of COVID, due to I haven't got my phone on me, but I think it was some sort of latency to do with breathing, like your breathing latency. They were saying that they were picking up on cases of COVID-19 prior to people being actually diagnosed with it.
Wow.
So they noticed that the people's breathing had changed slightly, and they were actually using it as a precursor to there might be something going on here, and they distributed a few to hospitals.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
I'll send you the article because it's one of the better ones. It's really detailed. It's on their podcast as well, I believe. And just hearing that aspect of it was really interesting. They were looking at it and going, because that latency shouldn't change by maybe 1 or 2. But people who were then coming down with COVID-19 for the first time was changing by 4 or 5 or 5 or 6.
Okay.
They were like, it was kind of becoming like a little red light. But even now, the buttons added. You could be conspiracy all you want, but the button adds to your recovery score. So in that, it says at the end of your journal, it says to you, you can click a button to see if you've had the first vaccine.
Wow.
So it monitors it. Now, what I found interesting about this is Jess, who lives with me and Tasha and is part of Wolfpack. She had in the green recovery all week. She then gets her second COVID jag. The day after, her recovery score is the lowest I've ever seen it at. It was either 1% or 3%.
Wow.
24 hours later,
he
was back in the green again.
Wow.
So
incredible.
and it had to have been the vaccine. There was no
Yeah.
other variables to show such a shift. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all in the green. Thursday gets it. Friday dramatically drops, like from 86% recovered down to 1, I think it was, or 3. Never seen anything lower. And
Wow.
in 24 hours, spikes back up again to normal level.
COVID-19 for recovery, man. You've got it. The COVID-19 vaccine has the answers to our recovery problems.
Dude, I was just literally like, her body must have literally been taking that vaccine on and, you know, feeling the effects of her body making the adjustments.
Yeah, of course.
For the band to even pick up on anything.
That's a very subtle change, isn't it? Obviously, the body's being infected subtly by you know, elements of the virus, so we can develop antibodies and stuff. But for it to pick up on that, it's really interesting, isn't it?
I know you'll want to see it anyway, so I'll send you some of it after.
Yeah, please do.
It was fast. I was like, oh my god, like this is amazing.
Wow, you can nearly monitor the vaccine working. That's incredible. Yeah.
Honestly, it felt like it. Or at least at the point of where it had been taken, you go, okay, well, anyone who says it's placebo effect, they're injecting us with nothingness. I would probably have a pretty good argument now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Massively interesting.
Let's go back to something a bit more casual in regards to kickboxing. Tell me about some of your favorite competitors over the last few years and what you've enjoyed about them, male, female, points or light contact. I'm not really bothered. Like, I'm a massive fan of like tatami sport in general. So is there any standouts that you've enjoyed seeing their progress, or have you got a favorite fighter in mind?
Oh, I mean, I've loads. I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of Tony Stevenson. I mean, he's from our camp right here in Ireland.
I think I'm a big fan of Tony Stevenson. He's not from mine, so
yeah, he's a phenomenal fighter. He's one of my favorites. I think even predating that, I know Desi's kind of taking a bit of a break now, and he's gone off to travel the world. But Desi Leonard Jr. was an amazing fighter. He made it look like he wasn't doing anything. He had just amazing presence in the ring. I agree. I was able to pull off the most crazy looking angles and counter shots like without nearly breaking a sweat, you know. So I think those two guys. My favorite female fighter would be Urša Terdin from Slovenia.
Oh yeah.
Big fan. I mean, she's such a super person, which probably helps.
Yeah, God,
picking her as a great fighter.
Did you just pick a non-scientific element for why you like a fighter?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's all relevant, isn't it?
Touch onto human nature. How dare you?
It's qualitative. It works. She's a great fighter. Obviously, she comes from the Tomas Barada camp. And I've been watching Urša come through the Taekwondo ranks as a junior. She won the juniors in 2013 when Lauren won hers, and she's just a super technical, tidy fighter. And I was there in Slovenia when she beat Anna Žnar in the -70s in the European Championship final.
Which is no mean feat itself.
No mean feat whatsoever. I mean, we came close to Anna Žnar in the World Championship final here in Dublin.
I was there. I watched it.
Yeah, we just couldn't get past that big leg, that big chamber that she just lifts up and everything gets closed off. And we came close. It was in a point. She beat us by a point that day. It was a great fight, but it was great to see Urša doing it. Super tactical, closed down the leg, came up over the knee with the spear jab, and was able to work on the inside.
What do you think of so you talked about Tomas Barada there, and I attribute Thomas and a couple of others to the change in dynamic with light contact in WACO. 100%. And I think now, like we talk about, I think it's closer to points more than ever due to the shift in, shift out. For example, in Scotland, in GB, our full contact kickboxing at a time was very brawly, and it was very much continual.
Yep.
I think now we look at this style and it's short, sharp, explosion, in, out, break, switches here, sharp finishes there. And I attribute a lot of that to the involvement of ITF guys.
100%, Kev, yeah.
Half my light contact team are now ITF, who found me because they saw me go in to WACO tournaments, wanted to come and play. Scientifically, that's why I was quite interested that you split points and light contact. I think that split now has got to be smaller than ever before due to
it's possible, Kev, for sure. I mean, look, there's new rules now coming down the road that have kind of pulled light contact
on Sunday, actually.
They've got the new rules are going to change the dynamic of light contact. But I think you're right. I think Barada was the real catalyst for change for light contact. He was the first taekwondo guy to go in there, absolutely dominated. And the old school kind of flat-footed, full contact style was just obliterated by his speed, his lead leg tactics. He was able to switch back kick on a 5-cent piece.
I've actually held a kick shield for that one, by the way.
Yeah, you know, for a small guy, I mean, he's not tiny, but for a small guy, he can develop. So
he's a small guy compared to me, right?
Yeah. Okay,
I've ran at him with a kick shield, and he hit me with a jumping back kick.
Yeah, he's just so efficient. You know,
oh my God,
big influence.
The power ratio I felt through my body that day. It was one of those top 10 big biflex ones.
No, yeah.
And I went, oh yeah. And I went, this in here, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. I'm like with Danny Slevin, who's literally like the level on your shoulder.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, Danny, I'll do it. So I ran at him and bam, I was like, and my back just cracked really pleasantly, actually. It wasn't like death. It was more like, that's gone now.
Like a trip to the chiropractor.
Yeah, but the efficiency, technical efficiency is
absolutely
unparalleled.
Phenomenal. And explosive ability like no other. And he paved the way for everyone else within the ITF system to go into WACO. And I think ITF Taekwondo has changed light contact over the years.
Massively.
Soloway came in, similar style to Thomas Barada.
I'd love to have seen Natasha fight her. That's the one fight I always say.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that would have been an absolute classic. You'd pay big money to go and see that fight, you know.
It would have been great because I say that with absolute respect, by the way, because I see the way that she dominated ITF, and I see the way that Natasha maybe dominated in certain aspects of hers, but she's obviously won Irish Open in light contact alone.
Yeah.
She's won the double in light contact for the last 2 years. One of them the same year she had the baby.
That's right.
And imagine that in a ring or on like a little raised platformy type spectacle.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be fantastic?
So Sinead Beasley gave her a great fight. Do you remember that?
Really close. That was in 2013, I think. Yeah, in Turkey. Yeah.
And Bezo's some fighter as well. So it was definitely in the making of her. There's some good girls there that I'd love to have seen catch a fight a bit more of, maybe.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's a pity. I mean, she's retired now, and deservedly so. She's got, I don't know how many world titles under her belt and European titles, but it's phenomenal. But you know, I mean, ITF has really changed the style of light contact, but then WACO changed the ring size in 2014 or 2015, and everything changes.
Yeah.
Adam Shelley's probably one of the most recognizable ITF Taekwondo fighters in the world now, multiple 100%. World champion.
Yeah.
You know, I was national coach at the time, and you know, I had Adam bagging a medal at the European Championships in Slovenia that year. The change of the ring size destroyed him. You know, he's a long distance fighter. He likes to move around. He's a counter fighter. He can do both really well. But he accumulated so many exits within the second round. He was disqualified. It was heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking.
Not a nice way to go, is it?
Not a nice way to go. So the change in ring size is going to obviously change the format of the fight, the dynamics of the fight, and it has already moved away from dynamic lead leg attacking to now being a little bit more boxing focused. Because you do not want to be, as a counter fighter, you do not want to be anywhere near the edges, because now you get minus points. Back then you got a warning.
The level of interpretation that rule gives people frightens me. There's been a few times now, and I'm like, all you need, and this is no disrespect to referees at all, but I'm not going to sit here and lie either. You need one strong referee to feel there's an infringement, and just by saying stop in an overly assertive way, it is almost on the verge of an accusation that would allow weaker corner referees to go, why is that centre referee saying that in such a way? I need to do my job now.
Somebody's done something wrong.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's my biggest issue with a lot of this, is the grey area for exits is massive.
Huge.
And it's a case of now that the centre referee, well, ironically, I believe one of the rules is that the centre referee is going to have a bigger say in regards to.
Yeah, they don't need the unanimous decision anymore in relation. And there's pros and cons to that. And I mean, one of the pros is centre referees, through no intention really, would look, if an exit was made or a perceived exit was made, they'd look at the corner judge and they'd do this or this, you know. So they'd look and go, was it? So whatever the centre referee has seen, they will mimic to the. It's a suggestion. Yeah. And if I'm doing my job as a corner judge, which should be just to score the fight, and I look up to the centre referee and I'm not sure whether it's an exit or not, I'm more likely to go, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It was an exit because
so
you're suggesting it to me.
It's so difficult. Yeah, because
So,
not even that, but look at the language barrier. If I'm the centre referee and we're coming from different, we're really lucky in the fact that we've got referees from around the world.
yeah.
And we are obviously super grateful because oh God, I hate it. And I'm in the middle. Maybe and English isn't my first language. And I'm going exit, yes. You want to start nodding with me just because I'm nodding. It's things like that people go, oh, come on, Kevin. But ultimately, like behavior, gesture, suggestive behavior, on purpose or not, comes to the forefront. And unfortunately, I don't like talking about stuff that I don't have answers for because I don't. But it is a massive aspect of our game. There's been some fights, like you've said, that is absolutely heartbreaking because the better fighter lost, and that for me still that's never gonna sit right with me.
No, and time will tell what happens. I mean, the centre referee and light contact on the tatamis now have more authority, and that's great if the centre referee is highly experienced. If the centre referee
they have to be now. I think
they do.
By putting these rules in, I think our area, what they call them, the referees in charge of the area, like the area official.
Like the jury. In Taekwondo they call it the jury panel.
We need to see them going from what they were doing, which was taking a step back, and then actually, getting back involved again for this to actually work.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare.
And if it's done right, Kevin, we'll have centre referees that are as efficient as ring sports. The ring sports centre referees are brilliant.
Frightening, yeah.
They are brilliant, and they are so good at what they do. They don't miss a trick, and they're very authoritative. And don't get me wrong, people make mistakes, and that's fine, but they are very, very good. Compared to sometimes what you can see in tatami is that, you did a course last week, now you're going to, be centre referee in the European Championship.
It's hard because they're obviously given this kind of, we need you to go and qualify some referees because we're short for them. And then we're giving you 4, and there's no way they can overlook them while they're being the centre referee. So I do understand it, but totally. I do feel like when it comes to certain tournaments or certain divisions within a tournament, that there has to be a priority put back on having our very best referees roll their sleeves rolled up and back on those areas. And
totally,
this rule change is definitely. Do I feel like centre referees in light contact specifically can take on more responsibility? Absolutely. Because it does feel right now they are there purely for safety. Not saying that's not important. However, they're gesturing when they're stepping out of exit. They're gesturing when someone gets hit anyway. All we're doing is giving them an basis to follow through what they're already seeing, right?
Exactly. And a lot of these bad decisions, centre referees were able to hide behind the fact they got a unanimous decision. Well, everybody's saying it. That doesn't make it right.
The biggest rule I want to see changed.
Yeah, what is it?
Is I saw a tendency in the last couple of years now. I don't know if you were there. I don't think you were. Couple of fighters winning kickboxing fights without kicking.
Oh, so a mandatory kick count. Yeah.
I don't even mind them. I just like an effort.
Absolutely. And there's nothing in the rules to say they have to kick.
Amateur boxing team and chuck them in light contact.
No, There's nothing in the rule that says you have to kick in light contact at all.
Blows my mind. Like,
I know. Maybe it'll come in the future. I don't know. I mean, they've brought back the 8 count. They've brought back the 10 count to get yourself up off the ground and stuff. So it's going to turn into a very controlled style of full contact on the mats. That's the direction that
isn't necessarily a bad thing, right?
No, not really. As long as it maintains that dynamic kind of.
Tell me that an ITF guy hitting you with a back kick isn't full contact.
It's always full contact, man.
Yeah, telling me
I can tell you that, for sure.
A good clean points fighter who decides to step in with jab cross at the moment you chamber it and you do it badly isn't full contact. But take your head off.
Light contact's a bit of a misnomer. Let's be honest.
It is, yeah.
Nobody in light contact is hitting you light. Not a chance.
No, I can't remember ever saying. I can't remember teaching that.
Never. Never. Make sure you go easy on your opponent.
Yeah, just be careful. Keep it light, right? Because it's light contact.
The only difference is you can't win by purposely knocking down your opponent. You can do that in the ring, but you can't do it on the tatami. That's the only difference. But you still get clobbered, man. still get clobbered, and you can still stop opponents with good shots. You can still,
Yeah.
get a technical knockout that they can't continue. Now, let's see how that's going to pan out with these new rules, and bringing the 10 and 8 count back in. I understand the reason for bringing the count back in. It's got to do with the safety of the fighter and concussion, and silly coaches pushing their fighters back out after they've been given a pretty significant clout to the head, or they've fallen and they've banged their head, where they're stood back up and they're sent on again. That's dangerous stuff. So
Yeah.
this 10 seconds allows and 8 seconds allows that to kind of be challenged by the referee.
What's your first tournament going to be this year?
The first one that comes up. I can't wait to get back into it.
What's your gut?
The use of games, the university games is cancelled. I don't know if you got that update. Robin won the European kick light and light contact juniors last year, so it's our first year as a senior, and we were targeting the use of games. So that's gone now. It said, like they said, it's going to be pushed down to further in the year, but I can't see it happening.
I'm praying for Bristol.
Bristol will be nice. Yeah, I mean, look, the UK's in a good place at the moment with their vaccination rollout. So it depends on who they let in.
Well, it's not that for me. Is getting back in. So if I went to one of these European countries that have had a couple already, I'm not paying £1,200 to sit in a hotel for 7 days afterwards.
Oh yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy.
Mate,
it'd be nice to get something. It'd be nice to get something anyway.
Yeah. Listen, we should do this again. Like, there's so much I haven't touched on half the stuff.
Happy to. Part 2.
Dude, 100%. But if listeners are anything like me, my attention span's awful. So listen, thanks very much today.
Pleasure, mate. It was good to chat. It was good to break up the day and have a conversation on the sport.
Put some details on the YouTube channel so people can actually touch base with yourself in regards to stuff we've touched on. But and one thing I would, as a club owner, more than just this kind of podcast, is I'd love to get you over at some stage and kind of combined. We can do like a session together.
Sure.
And maybe invite, when we're allowed to invite other people, come to the club and get an aspect of listening to you talk from a coaching point of view, some groundwork on the mats. We can use the CrossFit gym for sure. It'd be great to catch up.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Let's pencil that in for some time and everything's back to normal.
Mate, brilliant. Sounds
great.
Cheers,
mate. Good to chat. Thanks again for the invite. See you soon, mate. Take care. Bye-bye.